All right, next we're going to go through kind of preparing to fundraise and some best practices and tips to help you be successful in a very challenging endeavor. One of the things that I think can be helpful, and as Matt talks about, a lot of fundraising happens through network with people. So take the time to start networking well before you need to make the ask for money. To build a network, it does take time, and I think you have to build a relationship with someone before maybe they have the confidence to introduce you to their network. So it's not just one meeting, they like you, and then they're going to open their Rolodex for you. Getting to know someone really does take some time. When you're starting to talk with people about your company, it's important to be mindful about what you share about your company. The reality is startups pivot and go through many different iterations, but you want to make sure that it's not confusing to the marketplace. So if you meet with one person and you kind of pitch your company one way and say, we're doing this, and then a month later you meet with that person's friend and you're giving a completely different pitch, you're going to create market confusion. So be mindful as you're out talking about your company. What do you want the key takeaways to be? What do you want people to remember about your company? Talking about metrics, it is helpful to show some growth and share metrics. But know that most VCs and angels are keeping note of where you said you were and where you said you were going to be. And the next time you see them, they're going to be asking you. And so you want to try not to make that as inconsistent. You want that to be a consistent, linear path because they're getting to know you. And if you beat your expectations, they're going to be super excited. If you miss them, you might get judged by that. I also think if you can, take time to know who could be on your board. That person's going to be on your board for probably 5 years. You can't really fire a board member. So as you're thinking about preparing for the raise, think about who you'd want to work with for the next 5 years. They're going to be a big part of your life. Getting organized. We touched about this a little bit, Casey. Do you use Dropbox or Box? Once the diligence process starts, you're going to be asked to provide a lot of material, and it helps to get organized earlier in the process than later. When someone asks you for something, you want to be able to provide it quickly and demonstrate you have your stuff together, you're on top of your business, and you're ready to go. One of the things that I found helpful is once you start to disseminate materials, you might start to change your pitch slightly. You might update your metrics. I found it helpful, and I learned the hard way, is keeping track of what deck you gave to who, and remembering what changed, and being upfront with someone of, hey, XYZ changed, this has been updated. So a tip that I found helpful is creating individual Box or Dropbox folders, and putting the VC or angel name on each one, and copying all the materials that I sent to that VC or angel into that box. So when they say, hey, I'm looking at page 6 of your deck, can you explain XYZ? You're not, well shit, what deck do they have? Because your deck will change. Also, Matt, I don't know how you kept yourself organized when you have 112 meetings. One tool that I found really helpful is to just create a simple spreadsheet. Who's the contact? What's their contact information? When did you meet with them? What follow-up did you say you were going to send them? Where was the last conversation? What's the next step? Just kind of track that all in a spreadsheet, because once you start to have 50 plus relationships all moving at the same time, it's easy to lose track of that, and you might be too far down the path to remember, or to then realize, hey, I can't actually remember all of this on a piece of paper or my post-it notes. So keeping it all in one place will be helpful. That same list can come in helpful the second, third time you raise as well, because what you might learn is John says, hey, I really like you, but I don't invest at this stage. I invest when you're looking to raise $5 million. Stay in touch with me, come back to me. Okay, you'll want to continue to build that relationship and have a way to track those conversations.
Cherise, just a quick point on that, because something I've seen that's a little counterintuitive is keeping track of that also, because once in a while later on you'll hear somebody who was interested in investing and the founder never came back to them, and they have hard feelings that they didn't get a chance to. They wanted to write a check and they didn't get a chance. They're kind of like, I can't believe you didn't save room for me, you know. So it's worth at least preserving goodwill for the next round.
Absolutely, because you don't want to. Relationships are so important to raising capital. You don't want to mess any of them up, and forgetting to do something or forgetting to include someone doesn't probably sit well with that potential investor. There's a handout. If you flip the page, this is an example of potentially what you'd be asked for due diligence, and this is the type of material to get ready and put out in your Dropbox. The little nuance or tricky part of preparing data is if your fundraising process takes 9 months, you're not going to want to constantly be updating your Dropbox with that material. So have kind of a clear view of which of the items aren't going to change. So your LLC documents aren't going to change. Your formation documents aren't going to change. Your cap table aren't going to change. So you can get all of that ready. Some of the marketing, sales, et cetera, material will constantly be changing. So you might hold off and not put those out into your Dropbox till you're really at that kind of final stage of raising. But know that you're going to be asked for it. Know that you will have to provide that additional data, and you're not given 3 weeks now to go submit the diligence list. It's kind of expected that within a week of getting a term sheet, you can turn around all these diligence materials.
Cherise? You have the preferred formats are Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. Those are, they're all editable. Is there ever an issue with that? Like you're sending them editable formats?
I've never had an issue with that. At that point, you're sharing this really in-depth data after you have a term sheet, and at that point, you're further along in the process. If you're worried about something being edited, you can always convert it to a PDF and send it as a PDF.
Is there a reason why those are preferred?
So I've had analysts who want an editable version of my spreadsheets because they want to take it and they want to play around with it. They want to kind of copy and paste some assumptions and then make their own assumptions when it comes to the financial model, for example. They also see a lot of data, and so they've preferred things that they can copy and paste and then put into their own decks that they're using to pitch internally. It's hard to copy and paste from a PDF. Building momentum. I think some of the best deals happen when there's momentum, and investors get excited when there's momentum. If you're not demonstrating momentum, I think it's going to be hard to get a deal done. And momentum looks differently depending on what stage you're at. Early momentum might be pilot customers. Early momentum might be that you have tangible a product and you've been able to show that you can execute different technology releases on that product. Later on, momentum's more going to look like, what does your sales look like? What's your revenue look like? How many customers do you have? Are you getting momentum in the industry? Are people starting to talk about you? So momentum can mean different things at different stages. We've talked about this, I think, over and over and over. Knowing your business and anticipating questions. I was talking to an entrepreneur the other day, and he said, it's so hard to have these investor conversations because each investor cares about something different, and I'm not an expert in all areas of my business yet. And that's completely fair. The first, second time you're building something, sometimes even the third time, the industry is different, and so you're expected to know everything about your industry. You may not know everything about your industry. You need to know these new benchmarks that all VCs are now looking at, and you're kind of like, I didn't know what MRR was prior to being asked. So my advice is read, get to know kind of the tough questions that they're gonna ask you. Be honest when you don't know, and that's fair to say, you know what, I've never been asked that, you know, let me give that some thought and I'll get back to you. And then you have to walk out of that meeting, go do your research and get them an answer really quickly. There's ways to recover by not knowing the answer. But the goal is to know as much about your business, about your industry, going into these meetings. You can also find maybe individuals that aren't the right fit to invest in your company, but are investors and are willing to sit down with you and ask really tough questions. I call it like find friendly investors, so that you've been going through the ringer with friendlies prior to that you know, VC that you really want to invest in your company. It's not the best practice the first go around to be sitting across someone who you really want and you haven't been asked the tough questions and know how you're going to respond. I put some examples on here. So like in a SaaS business, Casey and I were talking about this a little bit, knowing what your MRR is. That's a very common question that's being asked these days. Knowing what CAC is and how you're going to defend what your customer acquisition cost is. Knowing what your cash burn is. I've been surprised by people that just don't know how much cash that they burn, and as they ramp up, they don't know what their cash burn is going to be. So being able to talk through those business fundamentals will help you be more successful in your raise. Another thing I've learned really the hard way is you can get 6 months into it, you get the term sheet, you're ready to rock and roll. You have to be prepared to manage that close. As much as you prepared and spent time the last 6, 7, 8 months, the tension doesn't stop when you get that term sheet. I had this unique example where one of my investors was hiking a mountain and was unavailable for 14 days. And that was during a critical time where we needed him to sign off on some things. We needed his signatures on important documents. And I just assumed, you know what, this is the center of my universe. It's not the center of his. So things like that, managing all the timelines, managing all the players so that you can successfully get to a close. It takes time, takes preparation, takes thinking through the moving dynamics. The closing checklist. I don't know if Brown and Winnick, Chris, if you can speak to this, but I've often used a closing checklist with my attorneys and the investors' attorneys, and getting really clear on who's doing what, whose responsibility is what, when we're trying to have documents to each stage, and setting timelines and responsibilities to that checklist can help manage an efficient close.
If you don't have it, you'll just have fingers pointing back and forth. I thought you were doing it, or both will be doing it, and then, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Big believer in checklists. Big believer also in kind of a post-closing sort of a, whether you want to call it a memo or whatever, just sort of regurgitate onto a piece of paper for yourself what happened and why did you go this direction, and it just helps you later.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's preparation in 5 minutes. Any questions on any of that material that we just covered?
I have one question. You mentioned, and I actually now mentioned it as well, that staying in contact with your investors or potential investors, even though they said no. How do you go about that process?
That's coming up on the slide.
We're going to talk about it a little later. Are you talking about short term or long term? Or both?
I guess both. Someone said no, and if we're getting to it, that's fine. But I'm curious how you go about continuing to cultivate that relationship and staying in front of them without being a pest.
So if it's someone that you're wanting maybe to invest in your next round, maybe you're doing a seed and you think they'd be great for an A, one of the tools that I've used is whenever there's good press, forwarding a link along and saying, hey, here's an update on our company, check it out if you're interested. If there's a key milestone that they were interested in, that was another thing that I would use as a touch point. If they said, hey, I'm really interested in when you hit XYZ. I would put that in my spreadsheet, and when I hit that major milestone customer, I'd make sure that they were one of the first people to know. But it's figuring out what's relevant to them. You don't want to just spam them with information that they don't care about. All right, finding investors. Finding investors is, there's, it's not easy. These are some tools and methodologies that have worked well for me. I also think Matt shared a lot of great examples of, building a network and getting to know investors locally. Before, you think about what kind of investors you want, I think it's important to know what stage you're at, and do those investors invest in that stage? You're probably not going to have a lot of patient investors if you're clearly not their type and you haven't done your research. One of the tools that is really helpful, and I didn't know about this 6 years ago, is a site called Crunchbase. You can go on Crunchbase and learn a ton about investors. What size of check they typically write, what size of deals they come into, do they lead, do they not lead, what kind of companies do they invest in, do they have a certain industry that they invest in. So do your research and try to figure out the investors that are a good fit for you. It's kind of like sales, right? If someone isn't a good target fit for your widget, you're wasting time talking to them. So it's like a typical sell. Figure out who your target audience is, figure out who your target investor is. I would also suggest talking to other entrepreneurs. You can learn a lot through other entrepreneurs as far as what investors are good for certain stages, what luck they've had with certain investors. You can also get some inside information. A lot of investors don't want to be ruled out. They want deal flow. So they might say one thing, but their actions show another. Another reason I like Crunchbase is it's based on data versus their website that says, we invest in all stages. And then you call them, oh, you're too early for us. Then you come back at Series A, oh, you're too early for us. It's really, they want the deal flow, but their behavior doesn't show. Their behavior shows another thing. Crunchbase will help you flesh that out. Other entrepreneurs can help you flesh that out as well. Who have they had success raising money from, and at what stage? Can they give you any insight into that audience? What is that investor looking for? So as you prepare your pitch, as you prepare to go in and talk to them, you can determine if you're already kind of a good fit or not. For example, I have an investor that I have a good relationship with, and they are very clear about their investment thesis. They invest in X type of companies, and they don't deviate. And so I can have, a friend who has a wonderful company and is a wonderful entrepreneur. I know that introduction is not an introduction worth anyone's time because they don't invest in those types of companies. I gave the example earlier where another good VC friend of mine, they only invest in tech heavy companies with tech founders. And I was giving him some flack the other day. Well, what about this great company? I think they're going to be highly successful. They don't have a tech founder. And he's like, I will never get it by my committee. We only invest in tech founder companies. So those are the types of nuances, that there are exceptions, but more often than not, it's going to waste your time trying to be the standout different company than what they normally invest in. Hustle, hustle, hustle. To get the conversations it's not easy. There's a couple different ways that I think can help you get into the conversation. Warm introductions often will make or break if a VC will take a meeting with you. So you can get really creative. Go on LinkedIn. Who are they connected to that you're connected to? Go on Twitter. Go on Facebook. Use tools like that to figure out what are they talking about. Who are they connecting with? What's your in to that VC. Other ways that you can get warm leads or introductions are getting to know other entrepreneurs. And this takes some time. You know, some entrepreneurs are going to be really tight with their introductions and who they're willing to make introductions for, because that network is something that is kind of highly valuable and treasured in some sense. But if you truly get to know other entrepreneurs and build a long-lasting relationships, they're going to be, you know, more willing to open some doors for you. Maybe make some introductions to VCs that have invested in them, board members, etc. Other ways to get in the door with VCs, there's great resources through Mike Colwell and Sheldon and Brian and some of the other incubators in town. They have connections with VCs. They know who's doing what. And as they get to know you, I'm sure that they'd be willing to help open some doors. Press and publicity can also help drive traffic your way. Again, it's kind of like sales and marketing 101. Not only, you know, how do you sell your product? In the VC world, it's a sales process. So name recognition helps. Name recognition, and if you have a great article in the Register and it sparks someone's interest, there's nothing better than an inbound warm lead through a VC calling you and reaching out to you because they read about you. Conferences and speaking opportunities are also ways that you can get your name out there and start to get to know people as well.